Shake, Rattle, and Troll is brought to you by Bill Luke Dodge Chrysler Jeep. Now, here's your host, saltwater fisherman and tournament pro, Don McDowell.
Yeah, man. Hey, I'm Don McDowell. Welcome to the last 2013 episode
of Shake, Rattle, and Troll.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you what. It seems like 2013 just flew by like a drunk Friday night. Or is it my imagination?
Mine feels more like it was a hangover from the drunk Friday night all year long.
Well, JK, I want to thank you for coming down and participating in this. We have a special guest, very special guest, Jim DeVos, Assistant Director of Wildlife at Arizona Game and Fish Department.
And I'm honored to be in his presence, as
Absolutely.
always.
Jim, welcome. I know it's kind of early for all of us today, but a lot of stuff has come down this year at the department, and wow, I think this is probably the strongest board of commissioners I've seen in an awfully long time. We're going to get a new one, and I don't know who that new one is, but the current commissioners seem to be putting on some battle dress and stepping up to the front lines.
They certainly are. I think we've got a commission now that recognizes the importance of sportsmen and is more than willing to engage in some of the controversial issues. So, yeah, we've got a good commission. Look forward to a new one coming soon.
You wouldn't happen to have any hints or knowledge, would you?
Actually, I don't.
Okay. Just curious. Just asking.
It's a process.
We know.
Yeah, it's long gone from anywhere in the department now. It's working through the governor's office, and then we'll have a Senate vote, Senate confirmation shortly after the session starts. We hope, anyway.
I just don't want to have to go back down and lobby for anybody again. It takes too much time and energy. It really does.
Indeed. Well, it seems like I was at the department not too long ago, and Eric Swanson is retiring.
Yeah, Eric's leaving. I think he's been there for 30 years. The majority of that time's been running the urban fishing. Now it's called community fishing. He's built it from a program that only had a few lakes to something that I think is really something that both Game and Fish and the state can be proud of. It provides a tremendous opportunity for people that don't have the resources to go to Bartlett, but want to introduce kids to fishing. I used to patrol those lakes quite often, and you'd see young kids down there that rode their bike down there. You'd see folks in a wheelchair. It was just a great opportunity for people to get involved in the sport.
Well, we're going to miss Eric, and my comments mirror yours. I've known Eric for a long time. We've worked hand in hand on numerous things, but he's going to be missed. Urban fishing program is certainly one of the milestones under his watch. What other movement are we having department-wise?
Well, we've got a lot of people that are retiring. Bruce Hickto's retiring. He was the I&E program manager out of Pine Top and really did a tremendous job at keeping the public involved and informed in his community. He was active and one of the more productive people that we had. So he's certainly going to be lost.
Doug Thornburg is retiring after an incident with his motorcycle again.
I ride a motorcycle, but after looking at his history, I'm thinking maybe I ought to get off of it.
I've got several projects going, and getting my chopper up and running is taking a back burner after talking to Doug.
You don't bounce nearly as well as you used to, sir.
And,
just saying.
No, I've had my share of incidences with that damn thing, and some things at certain points in life just don't make any sense, and I'm kind of thinking that's one of them.
I learned at an early age. I think I was 18 when I was riding with somebody, and I slid under the back of a pickup truck with him, and I'm looking up at that gas tank and thinking, I'm never going to do this again.
Wow.
And I didn't.
Don, one of the other changes that we're going to have, Larry Riley, who's been in a variety of fisheries-related jobs is leaving the department day after tomorrow. So,
is that right?
Yeah. Larry's been one of the people that I've enjoyed working with for a long time. Very knowledgeable, great at working with budgets, and so that's another big loss to the department.
Absolutely. I've known Larry. He was my first branch chief, fish chief, and made a huge impact in my life, and I have a lot of respect for Larry. I like Larry a lot, even though he's dubbed me with walking probable cause. And let's just say, he was sitting right there in that chair one day, and a lot of fun stuff happens. Somebody made the mistake of putting a phone book on his chair so he could reach the microphone.
Yeah, I can kind of see that happening.
I can't imagine who would do that. Can you, Don?
No. Mm-mm. Let's just, that lottery process that they have for the elk tags.
Now you wonder why you're not getting drawn?
That's right.
Yeah. No, he's done a great job. I know he's worked on a number of things pretty close to the feds. Any news on where he might end up?
You know what? I'm not real sure.
I don't see him throwing in the towel.
I don't think he's going to throw in the towel. I think we'll see Larry resurface someplace. He's young. He's relatively energetic, and I think one of the people that have a tremendous knowledge base, like I said. So don't know where he might end up, but I suspect that he will end up. We've had a lot of the people that have left the department in the last few years have gone to work for the Fish and Wildlife Service.
I was thinking he probably has a map to how to get to Albuquerque.
I would think that certainly that's a possibility.
Well, Jim, you want
to get the pool?
You retired from the department, and obviously you spent some time with some of the conservation groups, the true conservation groups in the state of Arizona, and you helped us immeasurably on a lot of things that we were working on. And then just recently you went back within the Ivory Towers. How long were you gone?
You know what? I left in 2006, so I was gone for 7 years. And part of what the director is doing right now is rebuilding his executive staff. In early summer, he brought Jim Hinkle back.
Right.
Jim was very active in wildlife conservation when he was in Region 1. Came down to Phoenix for a little tour of duty. He was the big game supervisor. And he left for a little bit for some personal issues, and then came back in early summer. And then in September, I came back and been back for about 4 months. In my first tour of duty, I spent 34 years with the department, everything from wildlife manager to biologist to hardcore administrator. So
you worked with Sherry Barrett on some desert tortoise projects too, didn't you? Back in the day.
I did back in the day. Barely remember that far back, but yeah, I worked with Sherry on tortoises and some other things.
How long were you at WM?
I was at WM for about 3.5 years.
Wow!
And then I went to
which unit?
I was in 2 units. I had 36B and C, and at that time, that position had to live in Nogales, and wasn't my favorite place to live. And shortly after I was there, the Patagonia district came open. That was 34A and B. And so I spent about 3.5 years living in Patagonia and roaming the hills along the Mexican border.
Yeah.
Wasn't nearly as difficult back then, was it?
You know, it was different. Certainly the high level of violence wasn't there. But it was not uncommon to see a plane slip through the pass and drop under the radar into Tucson. Oftentimes we'd run into people that were out there probably up to no good. Mm-hmm. So I think the difference is the level of violence now that's
truly escalated.
The cartels have brought.
Well, there was a group here. They've kind of vanished here the last couple of years. Hunters who care were going down and picking up trash out in the wildlife habitat, and tons and more than 40 tons of plastic bottles and paper
and clothing.
Yeah,
clothing, diapers, anything and everything that you shed.
Last I talked to them, they kind of threw their hands in the air. It's like,
Can't do it anymore.
No, it's just crazy. Yeah.
It seems to me, and one of my favorite places to hunt is 36C. So every time I can get a permit, I go down there. And in the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen a lot less foot traffic coming through that area, a lot less trash. Perhaps it's the economy in Arizona and not any jobs and some of the laws that have been passed. But to me, it's a lot cleaner place, a lot safer place in the last few years.
Well, I find it interesting. I talked to, and during the course of Shake, Rattle, and 12 business, we have a national presence. And talking with people in Alabama and Missouri and Wisconsin and so on, often there's a discussion on that line of demarcation, the Homeland Security warning. We've got, 28,000 square miles below that line that says, be careful, don't go here.
Right.
And seems like we have an awful lot of leftover tags in the southern part of the state.
We do, particularly in Javelina. I think a lot of that has to do perhaps with the economy. Driving south that far to go hunt a Javelina isn't terribly popular. I know the whitetail tags get snapped up fairly quickly.
Commissioner Harris is fond of saying, anytime you want, Johnny boy, come on down. I'll show you where the whitetail is.
Well, we made that decision. Pat and I have over-the-counter leftover tags in 28 that we were talking about, and that was the choice: either drive there or drive to Prescott. It's closer to go to Prescott.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I didn't put in the first round, but I picked up a 19A permit.
Nice.
Well,
hold that thought, Mr. DeVos. We have to flip into a break. Thanks to some of our sponsors, including Bill Luke, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, I-17 and Camelback since 1927.
Special K.
And Jim DeVos.
There you go. We'll be right back.
He can't even skin a bug. Here they come again. Catch us if you can.
You can sing along, Jim.
No, I'm not going to sing along. Everybody turn it off.
Yeah, boy.
Catch us if you can.
All right, we're back. Special guest, Jim DeVos from AZGFD. How much enforcement did you actually engage in as a wildlife manager?
I did a lot, actually. It was one of the things that was gratifying to me. One of the problems that we often have in wildlife management is you go out and you do a deer survey and you come back and you've counted 31 deer, and then you go through the process of managing the data. So you got a long, drawn-out process. You go out to the lake and you find a guy that's fishing without a license. It's over and done with. You got something that's quantifiable right there.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Plus, it was one of the things. A lot of the violations that we work on are what I call revenue violations. You don't have a fishing license, then you just at that time it was about $15 that you took out of the state's pocket. So. It was just something that I gravitated to, and I had Patagonia Lake in the district, and that was always a place that needed patrolling. We had a lot of folks there that would show up without licenses, so I did quite a bit. Had a fairly game-rich district. We had a lot of whitetail there, so it was just one of the things that I gravitated to.
We really enjoyed working with Officer Kenny D on Operation Game Thief, and looking forward to having his replacement due to his promotion starting after the first of the year.
Does he know you anymore, Kenny D? I mean, I think that there was this talk about him supposedly coming down once every 3 months and sitting and going through that.
We've talked about that. Last time I talked to him before the holiday break, he said he was wearing 3 hats and a couple of different badges and doing this and that. So we've got a new guy, and I don't know who that is. Don't know what his name is.
You know what? I think that I will think of it. We just hired 2 new people into the law enforcement branch. Dave Rigo is one.
Is that Jenny Regal's husband?
David Rigo?
Yeah. He was the wildlife manager that covered Pleasant and
right.
that lower portion of 20B. So we've got two, and I don't recall who the OGT coordinator is, but just coming in.
Rigo's a good man.
Yeah, he is.
Really a good man. Yeah, he's on it.
I like his bride better.
Well, now they have a new...
what's that say about you?
New baby Rigo.
That's true.
Yeah. Something Easton Rigo.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all good, but I'm anxious to get down with the new OGT rep. And to answer your question, as soon as I got wind of that poaching incident in 6B, okay, we were in 6B, I wanted to make sure that Kenny Dinkwell knew exactly where we were.
And where you were not is more specific.
We weren't down there. We were on Sunday, as it were, but we were about 4 miles north. And, I really think some of the stuff that we put out on the Bad Boys reports helping out. I know there's we've had credit for 2 information leading to
conviction,
catching the perpetrators, as it were. But interesting guys. So hopefully we'll have something in early January with those guys. And Chief Cantrell doing a great job this year. We're starting AIS enforcement. Any news on that?
You know what? We're getting ready to roll out January 1. We've done a number of press releases to let the public know that we are going to roll out. In the past, a lot of the AIS effort has been educating the public about the danger of AIS, and now it's time to kind of turn that around and start re-educating the public.
Jesse Jackson had a phrase: "If we cannot educate, we must regulate."
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we're at right now.
We're here.
We've done some surveys on compliance, and it seemed like pull your plug and drain your boat the compliance was high. But we've done a little bit of covert stuff lately where we've had folks sit there at the dock and watch with binoculars as people leave. And as we often see when they see the game of fish truck there, everybody's compliant. But when we're not around, then the compliance goes down. So we figured it was time to step up now and, regulate.
Do you need any help? I know how to write out those violations, and I'm certainly good with optics. I mean, I can pick off the ones that are coming out. We could have a lineup from here all the way to Carefree Highway with the people you could probably pull over on a busy weekend.
Well, I think Peoria Justice Court will get a fair amount of new activity as we start to move forward.
By the way, do you let the Peoria Justice Court know that, okay, just be prepared because we're going to have a boatload of guys, pardon the pun, boatload of guys coming in. They're going to have all these citations, and we would like you to work on a cooperative basis with us. Do you pre-clear that? Yeah, they've gone out, the folks in law enforcement have gone out to the different justice courts and talked to them about the importance of AIS and the fact that we are going to start rolling out enforcement, and so they're prepared. Okay. Awesome.
You with binoculars, that would be a peeping John. I'm just saying.
It's kind of a scary thing, that's particularly in the summertime out there.
I got to tell you, the thing that went through my mind was him up on a hill glassing a Holiday Inn Express.
I'm not a professional optics person, but I do stay at the Holiday Inn Express.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like... this past year we've had an awful lot of battles. I haven't been through the battles that John and I fought with the C and some of the other groups. We've had a lot of wins, but it just seems like we're rolling into 2014. And the battlefront's just blazing, especially on the wolf issue. What have you heard lately on the Jaguar issue? That comes and goes and comes and goes. And
Jaguar is an interesting critter. I know that Center for Biodiversity has asked the service to evaluate the need for critical habitat.
I think it was 783,000 acres they asked for a set-aside.
883.
Yeah, it's a substantial portion of southern Arizona. And the department has so far twice. The issue's come up twice. This is the third time. So far, the department has steadfastly voiced our opposition to designation of critical habitat. If you look at the data, there are essentially no solid records for females in a very long time. Some of the information that we have on a female that was around in the 60s.
Wasn't she transported in? She was brought in?
That's certainly what it seems to be. So it was, not a jaguar that wandered into Arizona by itself. So, being relatively astute at biology, I'm thinking that it's difficult to have a population when you have no females. And everything that we see is it's just a male that wanders around. We're about 150 to 180 miles from the nearest population of jaguars in Mexico. So we think that definitely the designation of critical habitat is not something that's biologically justified.
Good.
Whether it happens or not, we'll know. But
which brings up another question too. Are we going to? We're going to talk about this probably in the next segment. But certainly, whatever decision the Fish and Wildlife Service makes about wolves or jaguars or anything else, we've got litigation coming.
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay.
All right, we're going to stand down. Hold that thought back on it when we're back. I'm Don McDowell with
John Colazar
and Jim DeVos.
We'll be back.
That's a fact, but the thought of somebody else rubbing.
All righty, we're back with the Assistant Director of Nightlife from Arizona Game and Fish Department.
I've been known to do that. Yeah, that's it.
Jim, I need a bud.
Yeah.
My reputation precedes me in some places.
Just kidding. Jim DeVos doing a great job. Jim, we were talking about the jaguars, and there's a lot of folks out there that don't want our guys out in the woods hunting, fishing, or doing any other damn thing, basically. And we call them environmental litigants and some other things we don't want to repeat on the air, but
those are the only clean words you could use.
Yeah. We're fighting a lot of stuff. We've got awful lot of invasive species and endangered species. And what's your summary of where we're going to be going first and foremost in 2014?
All I can say is I think it's going to be a wild ride.
Buddy.
Everything from jaguars, wolves are certainly going to heat up. There's a push to list a number of different species. So, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride. And I think that, it's somewhat like a chess game. The conservation groups, wildlife conservation groups will make a move, and the enviros will counter. We learn from each other, and we're honing our skills to a new level. So it's not as simple of a fight as it was 10 years ago.
I've found myself trying to explain that to conservation guys that are new to the whole concept, and trying to explain to them that it is indeed a process. It's a process in and of itself. Just trying to get so look at you. You can't go do that.
Oh, exactly.
We have to do this, and.
One of the things, and you mentioned it in the last section, either you or John did, litigation. And one of the things that we're seeing is that litigation is certainly driving more and more decisions, particularly in federal agencies. They're making decisions that guard against litigation.
Is that going to be our first entry, you think, into the Equal Access to Justice Act would probably be the wolf issue?
You know what? It's really hard to tell. I know that the department has worked with a number of conservation groups. We've got an ad hoc wolf group that we're working with folks from Arizona Sports and Wildlife Conservation, the Arizona Antelope Foundation, Arizona Elk Society. So we have a number of groups that are involved. We're working with the cattle growers in that same group. And what we've tried to do is place in the administrative record key points that we want to have there to ensure that if litigation does become a reality, that we have a standing in court. And not only that we do, but the groups that we're working with do as well. It's an interesting time relative to wolves. The service has made some proposals. The department has some strong thoughts on those proposals. We just recently submitted almost 50 pages of comments on the 10J. 10J is the experimental non-essential status under which wolves are being managed today. So, we certainly hope that the service comes up with a reasonable proposal, but certainly the closing line in our last letter that we submitted is we don't seek litigation, but we're certainly not afraid of it.
Oh, good. That's the first time I think I've ever seen that in print from the department that they would be
Well,
willing
John,
to go
that
after
goes
him.
back to my earlier opening comments with Jim, and Jim's kind of hit the nail on the head with Jim Hinkle and Ty Gray, Jim DeVos, and leading the charge and having the backup with Davis and Harris, Mansell,
Madden,
and Commissioner Freshman Pat Madden. The commission's not ready, not scared to lock horns with these guys. And I think it's high time, even during this last closure, we saw so many fallacies of shutting this down, shutting that down, and with the rewording and reworking of the MOUs, we've talked about that. I've talked with commissioners about it and other department heads. Seems to me that if we're able to do that in a productive manner, we're more able to take back control of managing Arizona game and fish as we're supposed to. Because right now, you've got an awful lot of extraneous fingers in your pie, so to speak, trying to do your job. It's like, God, it's like having 6 ex-mother-in-laws and trying to keep them happy.
I'm not sure that you can do that with 6 ex-mother-in-laws, and I'm not sure that we can do it with all the partners that we have. Certainly, as we saw during the most recent federal shutdown, it caused a lot of consternation from the folks that look to Game and Fish for leadership in the conservation world. Inability to get to some lakes, inability to access refuges. We got a lot of feedback from the public that they weren't happy with that, and we've been working with federal partners to try and address what would happen if we have another government shutdown. Certainly don't anticipate one.
It could happen.
It could happen, and
it's going to happen again. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, as we sat in the department's executive staff before the last shutdown, everybody was saying, well, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, someone will blink. Well, no one blinked, and we had a almost 2-week federal shutdown, and it affected a lot of different things. So we're trying to prepare a contingency plan. We've been in contact with the Fish and Wildlife Service and trying to develop a better understanding of the process and how we can keep things open than we did last time.
Go ahead.
I think one of the big things that we did find out when the shutdown did occur is how little power we, the people, actually do have, because they control everything.
Yeah, and they is an awfully broad they.
It is, but it's hard to define it. You can pick on the Fish and Wildlife Service out of Albuquerque. A lot of issues there, but it goes clear to Washington, D.C. So, some of these mandates are coming down.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not an Albuquerque decision. No. It wasn't a local Forest Service decision. It was a direct mandate coming out of Washington. It said implement these closures in a relatively draconian approach.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just happened to be
term.
On an Albuquerque letterhead.
Jim, one of the other things, too, we're talking about, and I think this is the biggest, most critical issue for the citizens of Arizona, and that is that, when I watch some of the wolf meetings and I listen to comments by a large portion of the public, and that is they do not understand the different agencies involved and who really controls what sort of the issue. I know there were some accusatory terms used sometimes in first meeting in Payson, thinking that the department was in favor of this or in favor of that, when all that you guys were doing was simply to educate the public and let them know that they had an opportunity to comment on a federal decision. And I find that ignorance is the biggest enemy we have.
You know, one of the things is that it's difficult for people to understand some of the proposals. I know you read the documents that came out, the listing, delisting package for the gray wolf with the relisting of the Mexican wolf, and the scoping for the 10J, 10J being the experimental non-essential, and then we had the proposed rule change. So we had 3 major federal documents thrown at us in a very short period of time. And part of the comment that the department made to the service is that it's essentially impossible, even for paid staff at Game and Fish, to go through all of those documents in a timely fashion and provide comments. It's essentially impossible for many people in the public to sit down and go through hundreds of complex legal documents and understand them. That was one of the reasons why the department has been more active with the ad hoc group and providing our comments to different organizations so that we can help them understand to the extent that we can.
Well, and not only that, but to provide comments that are accurate and at least give a glimmer. As you and I both know, you can have all the emotion in the world. It's not going to sway science. And what we needed to approach was the logistics of it, the science-based background on it, what we had agreed to and why we're still agreeing to 100 versus, a complete endangered species, and why the involvement of Mexico was such a necessity. If you don't have 80% of its historic range, you're not going to recover an animal in one state when you've got 2,000 contiguous miles going south.
John, you've got valid points, but under the current administration and the social attitude that we'll live under right now, it's all about feel good, and it's emotion driven. Except
one of the things I think we need to pound on, and I think everybody should too, and that is that the urban dwellers who have no concept of what wildlife is about, who never or seldom get out of the cities, should not be mandating or dictating that which rural America has and does, and they don't know anything about it, and yet they're demanding actions or non-actions, and that's just wrong.
It's difficult to really evaluate. I know that the public is sharply divided on the issue of wolves. There are a lot of people in society that want wolves, and there are some segments of society that want them everywhere that they once were.
Well, there's only 2 sides to it, and then you've got the disengaged folks in the middle that don't what John's talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, hold that thought. I want to get back on that when we return back from break. I'm Don McDowell with
Jim DeVos.
Special K.
We'll be right back.
If you can't love a male show, the preacher man says it's the end of time, and the Mississippi River, she's a going dry.
All right, we're back here with Jim DeVos, heating up on the wolf issue here. And, Jim, it seems like, we're out there fighting the fight with you guys, kind of watching everybody's back here and trying to educate even the hunting population. And I think John had an astute point when this all began and we started taking public comments. The department was taking a lot of flack. Even the hunters thought it was your fault that you went and got the wolves and put them in the woods, and trying to educate through that process, educate through the quagga mussel process, the gizzard shad process. It's just getting back to the wolf issue, it's gizzard shad issue. There's only 2 sides to it.
Yeah, a lot of the things that we do, it is a binary decision. It's yes or no, and there's no gray.
One of the things we're really key on, John's really keyed up on it, is conservation is a byproduct of recreation and hunting.
Well, absolutely is. I mean,
and these anti-guys, they don't get it.
That's more preservationist.
If you look back in history, one of the things that we that work in wildlife management tout is the what we call the North American model.
Right.
if you look back, it's hard to believe when you look at the eastern states that have tremendous deer problems, white-tailed deer. For example, in Pennsylvania, though, there were no white-tailed deer, and so the hunter-angler has contributed to the return of many wildlife species. One of the things that the Arizona Game and Fish Department does do is we have a very active endangered species management, non-game management program. We've been leaders in projects like the return of the condor,
Black-footed ferret.
Well, that's a real success story. We had more black-footed ferrets produced in Arizona this year than any other state. So we do have a long history of working on that, and part of it is that we see Arizona as being a place that can have a diversity of wildlife, and as we get these species in and delisted, hopefully, as we have with a few successes, it allows the presence of this diverse wildlife.
You know, one of the things, too, I think a lot of hunters need to know, and that is that the question always comes up, why are we paying for black-footed ferrets? In reality, they're not, correct?
Well, we certainly get some federal dollars to work on them.
But that's not Pittman-Robinson money.
No, we don't. Primarily, our Pittman-Robinson goes to the restoration of game species.
Yeah. Correct. Okay. But, I mean, Indian gaming money, how is that utilized now?
Well, we've taken Indian gaming, we call it Wildlife Conservation Fund. We've developed that into a support mechanism that supports a lot of our non-game activities.
And land acquisition, habitat, and work, correct?
Absolutely, as is heritage.
Right.
We've acquired quite a bit of very valuable wildlife properties with both of those funding sources.
Okay. I know the Horseshoe Ranch is one that sticks out as being a real plum that was finally settled within the last couple of years for the department. That's going to be an area that I think more people will utilize in the future, correct?
Yeah, I think they will. It's a great place to go to visit. It's close to Phoenix. So, if you want to go out and see some wildlands, you can do it nice and convenient.
What's the exit that we take off the 17 to get in there?
You take off at the Bloody Basin turnoff, which is about milepost 259, I believe.
Yeah, so it's not that far up the road. You're still 75 miles outside of Flag.
Yeah, exactly.
One guy I want to ask about, I heard a rumor that Randy Babb got a promotion to Director of Watchable Wildlife. Is that correct?
Randy got a promotion. I'm not sure what his title is.
Great guy. You know what? That guy is just awesome. He has such a wealth of information.
He is.
And if you're a National Geo fan, you'll see him over in Vietnam playing with puff adders or something that's bad.
Yeah, Randy's got a real broad interest in wildlife, particularly the non-game part of it.
Yeah, snakes. Why does it have to be snakes?
Well, I've never quite figured that one out.
I don't get that.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about the Mexican garter snake nor the narrow-nosed garter snake, do we?
You know what? I don't think that we need to avoid it. I think it's part of the reality that we have to deal with in the department on a daily basis. There are groups that want more things to be listed, probably for a variety of different reasons. But there is a number of species that are being evaluated for listing that we deal with on a daily basis. So
where do we draw the line, Jim? I mean, if there was a narrow-nosed garter snake that was seen north of the Colorado River, and we happened to capture 5 of them in 1938, and now they're not there, why are we going to be held to a standard of accountability when, based on just the development of this state alone and what we've done to our waterways and the water levels that we have, why are we going to be punishing those who utilize the land and indeed do pay for it and are stewards of the land in the ranching community when they have to cordon off any riparian access to their cattle during these times when we have one single solitary item like the Mexican garter snake, where you go down south of the border and you have 2,000 contiguous miles of wonderful habitat that they're thriving in?
That's a difficult question, and one of the things that we try and do in the department is look at conservation practices that we can implement in lieu of listing.
Right.
Round-tailed chub is a species that's been proposed for listing. We're talking about trying to get a conservation agreement that would be very proactive and work with partners, landowners, other agencies, to where we implement strategies and projects that will ensure their presence on the land. So it's a difficult question to answer. Your original question was, where do we draw the line? And part of that's dictated by the courts, part of that's dictated by society. And I think that as we mature as a conservation entity, and that's a broad conservation entity that includes wildlife organizations, the Department, Forest Service. As we mature and learn, there are certainly alternatives to listing, and those are the things that we'd rather pursue in lieu of listing.
Well, I see some of those things too that we've done in the past, and I think that, quite frankly, the first salvo that was fired by the Center for Biological Diversity, 20 plus years ago, with the spotted owl issue, they had a victory, and their billy club has grown to be the size of a huge cannon. That they are the ones that you have to walk softly and just make sure that you don't irritate that monster, because they will go to court in a heartbeat, and they have the financial wherewithal where our conservation groups do not.
Going back to your original question to Jim, and topic that was brought up, the EAJA money. Mm-hmm. If that gets attacked and taken away, they don't give a damn about whatever they're hollering about. It's a money thing. They're astute enough to follow the money trail.
I think there's certainly some support for that concept. They've developed a large staff, including attorneys. Hard for me to sit here and say what their motives are. And they've done some good things too. We think in many cases they go overboard and pursue issues that are not truly driven by biology.
More by finance.
Part by finance, absolutely.
Jim, at this time every week we do roll call. Last week we had a UH-60 go down, took out 6 soldiers. 2 other soldiers were killed in action in other areas. But this week we have 1 soldier, Marine Sergeant Daniel M. Vasilion, 27 years old, out of Abington, Massachusetts, was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He was killed December 28th while conducting combat operations in Helmand Province in Afghanistan. 1 soldier, is a terrible price to pay. That was the price of your freedom this past week, along with the other 8 guys that went in. The good news is Seth Wakeling, you can catch a little episode of him walking off an airplane to meet his dad. Got his new leg and foot, doing quite well, and that's great news. One of the soldiers that we lost last week, Silverman, was from Scottsdale, Arizona. There are some special considerations being given to him from the governor's department. Keep that in your thoughts. 1 soldier, too many. I'm Don McDowell. We'll be back.
Don McDowell.
All right, hey, welcome to the second hour of Shake, Rattle, and Troll. If you're just joining us, our Assistant Wildlife Director from Arizona Game and Fish, Jim DeVos, is here with a interesting background in just a lot of stuff, biology and wildlife management and enforcement. And,
one of the things you spend enough time in the field, you do get a background in it.
Boy, you do, yeah.
34 years the first tour, huh?
34 the first tour, and then, I was active in conservation community for 7 years.
Yes, you were, and thank you so much for that.
Let me ask you this. In your career, did you ever run across Region 2 game warden? It wasn't a wildlife manager then. It was a game warden, Harold Van Sickle.
Yeah, I knew Harold. Harold did a lot of work in Unit 21, and I did some some work up there too. So yeah, I ran into him off and on.
He was an interesting guy. When I grew up, that was the authority in 6B was Harold, Mr. Bansicle.
Ooh.
And interesting guy. Of course, when you're little, everybody that's bigger than you is intimidating, but with those jowls that he had, oh my gosh.
Yeah, those guys from back in the day, they were cut from a stronger bolt of cloth.
Yeah.
Those guys were just hardcore field people that worked relentlessly to enforce the law and manage wildlife.
They did it well, too.
Steve Terrell and I had we had elk tags. It was unseasonably hot in the daytime and just freezing at night. So we decided one night we'd left bows and arrows and knives and all that stuff in the truck or in the camp, and we're sitting out on Rogers Lake on 231 spotlighting. And I don't know where Harold came from. I never saw any lights. He walked up and slapped the back of the cab of the truck and said, "Hello, boys."
Yeah, I can see him doing that. One of my favorite saying when I bump into people in the field, if I'm just out hunting, or a lot of times I would work in plain clothes. My favorite comment to them is, "You just never know when the game warden's around."
I asked Harold, I said, "Mr. Vansickle, where'd you come from?" He says, "I'm everywhere."
Yeah,
and he was.
Ken Clay works out of 4A. He handles that coming out of Winslow. And I was helping somebody who had a cow elk tag. It was a young lady. And we were coming down the road, and she saw a cow elk across the road. We jumped out, and I said, "Make sure you go to the other side," and start chasing after it. And here's Ken Clay, and he's like, "I've been watching you guys for about the last hour and a half." And I said, "What? How did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I was up on Chevelon Butte, and I saw you come in off of this road, and I watched you guys do that." And he said, "You were one of the few people that was up in this area, just to the east of Chevelon Butte, poking around in the sticks." And he said, "I was watching. It was a good time." Yeah, he had spotting scope watching us. He knew us.
Yeah, I get that eerie feeling. You're out in the woods all by yourself. Like
you're not.
Feel like you're being watched. Skinny Deke, well.
You never know when a game warden's around.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. Getting back on, some of the topics we've talked about, being the wolf issue. Where's your vision at the end of 2014 on the wolf issue?
Well, you know what? I think that without a doubt, someone's going to take us to court. The feelings on wolves are strong. I don't really know where the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to come down on what they want to do. I know the state's push is that we want to have a manageable population of wolves, and management is the key issue. Part of what's occurred in the Northern Rockies is that largely the management was dictated by federal court, and it's our goal to be able to have a wolf population in the state of Arizona that's in balance with the prey species, particularly deer and elk, that doesn't cause tremendous damage to the livestock industry. So management is the key. Believe it or not, 2014 seems to be a long ways off the end of 2014, but
not really.
I think we're going to be in a long-term management issue of wolves, with both sides trying to push their viewpoint on the rest of the public.
Let me put some clarity on this by asking, is this going to be solved in our lifetime?
It depends. Looking at you, I don't think so. Your lifetime's a lot shorter than ours.
You want to go in the parking lot?
No. You got the big truck today.
You know what? I think it will. Certainly one of the things that, if we look at the wolves themselves, we've had substantial increase in the number in the last 2 years. We've got, at the end of the year count in the numbers announced in the first part of 2013 from the count in 2012, we had 75 wolves on the ground. And that's about doubling what we had 2 years before. So
do you have confidence in those numbers?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, you agree with us though? There's well over 100 now.
Well, you know what? There's more out there. We know that 75 is a minimum count. Those are individuals that are counted. We get frequent calls, and as you guys do, we saw a wolf here, we saw a wolf there. Wolves, like a lot of predators, are fairly secretive. I have no doubt that we are certainly very near to 100 and perhaps over. There were 30 pups that were counted through the summer. I'm not the greatest at math, but 75 and 30 puts us right there, and then some that we don't know that are out there.
Sure. Well, I think you did mention guys are seeing wolves here and there and all that kind. And like you, I'm getting phone calls. I'm getting GPS waypoints, and we're trying to get trail cam pictures. And
that's the best documentation is a trail cam.
Yeah,
picture.
But the reality of it, if you're in the field, I've seen on 3 occasions. The first one was so long ago it doesn't even matter. But the last 4 or 5 years, 2 occasions where I've seen wolves. But man, these guys are hightailing it, and you just don't have time to get a camera or a cell phone out, take a picture, and they're gone.
You know what, though, Don, and this is one of the things that I'm curious about. When you're in the woods, you see very few trees at a water hole on a trail that doesn't have at least one trail cam on it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I think if wolves were as widespread as some people think they are, we would be picking up more trail cams. Just not seeing them. And they're in the places people select their position where they put those cameras out purposely to catch wildlife.
Absolutely, particularly spray species.
Yeah. Use of trail cams is becoming more and more widespread as a survey tool for things like mountain lions. They've got a jaguar project in southern Arizona. So, my sense is that they're not as widespread as what people report, because we're just not getting documented photo cams.
And one of the other things and I remember thinking about this yesterday, I wanted to ask you about it, and that is that the surveys that the Game and Fish Department takes, and of course we know that airtime, with the planes and the helicopters is number 1 dangerous and number 2 expensive. Has there been any investigation by the department into drone technology which would give you much more accurate and much more consistent readouts as to what is out there? And part of it is just analysis of film. We know that.
You know what? We're always looking at new technologies. The way we survey wolves right now is more dependent upon having a fairly large population, a portion of the population with radio collars on them. Mm-hmm. About 50% of the wolves are. And because of their social nature, when you find the one with a collar, you generally find them with a pack. So at this point in time, given the cover where wolves live, fairly dense wooded areas, the use of drones probably is not an effective tool, or certainly not as effective as what we're doing today.
Still, how about for deer and elk surveys in the future? That would seem to be a natural as soon as the technology becomes more affordable.
We're looking at the technology, and it's becoming more affordable all the time. I mean, we certainly know the capacity of drones in the war effort and how capable they are to do the job well. We're just not there on wildlife.
It's coming.
It's coming.
You'll be able to get them at a government liquidation sale pretty soon.
Like an M35.
No,
right?
Hoorah, yeah. All righty, when we come back, we're going to talk about interaction of the wolves with human beings.
They don't bother us. We don't bother them. They're loving natural animals. Anthropomorphism at its finest. Thank you, Walt Disney.
We'll be back.
Working on a pretty good buzz to turn my head whenever you walk in.
All righty, we're back. Jim, there's a lot of disinformation being put out, in my opinion, by the pro-wolfers. One of the big things they're standing on that there has been no documented wolf attacks on human beings in North America. And I have located at least in one search, 80 documented wolf-human encounters. What's your take on that?
I think that certainly the information that's out there suggests that the stories of wolf attacks are overblown, particularly as it relates to fatalities. It's best of my information is that there's been one fatal wolf attack.
From one, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's another one that it's really uncertain whether the person was killed by a wolf or whether a bear had killed him and wolves fed on him. So there is a history. A lot of the
that's a brutal thought either way that went.
Yeah, no matter what.
You were a loser no matter how you got there.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the information that the folks that are concerned about human safety come up with is attacks from other countries, Russia and some other places. One of the things that I think we need to think about in the United States is that our wolf populations are relatively new and growing. And when you have something that's rare like wolves were 20 years ago, the number of attacks certainly would be expected to be low. My personal opinion is that the danger posed by wolves is not as high as some would like the public to believe. There's been
that's at current numbers.
At current numbers, and I framed it within that context.
Sure.
Are wolves predators? Absolutely. Have wolves demonstrated aggressive behavior to people? Absolutely. And I think that there's certainly cause to be concerned about it. But I think that if we look at it, in Arizona, we've had bear attacks, we've had lion attacks, we've had lion fatalities in California. These animals, bears, lions, wolves, are predators, and a lot of the interactions that you've got in the paper that we just looked at show aggressive behavior, but don't lead to an attack. So it is a cause for concern, but I don't believe that the concept of widespread danger to the public is any greater with wolves than it is from some of the other
Do we have
species.
any documented cases here in Arizona in the last 4 or 5 years?
Of an attack, I believe that I've heard of one. We do have some instances where folks have reported aggressive behaviors. So it's not unheard of.
Yeah. Okay. What about the parasitical issues that are out there? Matt Cronin spoke about it a couple of different times, and disease-carrying issues.
You know what? There's nothing that a wolf would have that a coyote wouldn't.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I know every time that I go into a public meeting, the issue of human safety and health and welfare comes up. But diseases like rabies. We've got the parasites. They're out there, but certainly not unique to wolves. And at the densities that we see wolves right now, we go back, and even if we concede that we have 100 or so, how many coyotes do we have in the same amount of territory? So I believe that the issue of diseases is fairly overblown as well.
Well, wrapping this wolf conversation up, what's the next step, and when is that coming? The comment period was over mid-December, and they're still scoping the EIS and having to rifle through the bazillion comments that the service has.
Yeah, it's my understanding that they had over 250,000 comments submitted. The service, just on the wolf issue, on the Mexican gray wolf.
On the listing, delisting.
Oh, okay.
The delisting of the gray wolf is basically a national issue.
Right.
Those of us in the American Southwest are focused on Mexican wolves, but a lot of those comments relate to the listing, delisting. What the service will do is go through, compile those comments, summarize them, and use that information to help guide the development of the EIS that will be sent out in draft form sometime in spring of 2014. At that point in time, the public will have another chance to comment on.
Then the FEIS will be out.
Then the final FEIS will be out. They'll record the decision, and that will dictate how wolves are managed. From the state side, we're developing a state wolf plan that we hope will be something that we can work with the service on to help vest management of wolves with the state of Arizona, the Arizona Game and Fish. We're working in cooperation with New Mexico.
I was going to ask, at the last public meeting, Utah had some
representation there.
A whole lot of representation. Colorado, New Mexico obviously is given, and talking with Ryan Benson, there's a move to have Arizona, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico ban with Texas politically to make a similar statement to the service as did Texas.
Well, we're always looking for partners. I think you're right. And if you look at the state of Texas with their size and political influence, having them involved in this wolf issue would be something that certainly would help shape the state's comments as we move forward. One of the things that I think, you asked what the next step. We're looking at interacting with Mexico and perhaps working to expand our state wolf plan to include wolf planning in Mexico. I think John said it earlier that you can't recover the species unless you have Mexico involved.
Tremendous
Absolutely.
involvement.
The service has been reluctant to interact with them, but the state of Arizona, the states of New Mexico have a long-standing history of working with Mexico, exchanges of wildlife, whether it's Sonoran pronghorn, desert bighorn. We think that certainly the key to long-term recovery of the Mexican wolf rests with a binational program. It can't be done solely in Arizona and New Mexico.
Yeah, I think Larry Riley was working on the parrot issue that ended up being a pretty amicable program.
Yes.
So that was a good deal. Do you think having a symbiotic relationship with Mexico is a viable option and achievable?
I think it is. One of the things that Arizona's been pushing is a little bit different concept of compensation. Right now, the Compensation and Interdiction Council provides compensation to ranchers that have documented losses to wolves. Particularly in Mexico, we think if we twist that around and pay for conservation success rather than dead cows, we're going to be far more successful. It's a concept that has been widely used with sea turtles, where now communities are paid to watch the sea turtle nest rather than rob the eggs. When I went to a project in central Mexico, the monarch butterfly, deforestation was the biggest challenge to the monarch's wintering range. The NGOs and Fish and Wildlife Service have provided an ecotourism grant to the area. The last time I was there, the indigenous people, had essentially stopped cutting wood and were making their living with tourism. So it's not a foreign concept. You pay for conservation successes. We think that has great potential in Mexico.
One of the other things too, Jim, and that is my concern, and I think that it's a lot, is that wolves, coyotes in particular, are very clever animals. And I've noticed this in horses, the feral horses that we have up in 3A, 3C. They develop an absolute sense of impunity that they cannot be touched, and therefore they lose their fear of man. And that is my issue with the wolves, the Mexican gray wolves too, is that the more they're seen and the more that they have no return fire, the more bold and daring they become.
Johnny, you and I have talked about that. The data don't support that concept. Actually, the opposite seems to be true. The first wolves came from a captive rear program where they did have social contact, that they were dependent upon humans. But as they've gone wild, it's changed. They're getting wild.
Okay.
All righty, having said that, when we come back, we're going
Well,
fishing.
the morning's kind of damp. I'm not worried about cutting the grass. Left my truck at the boat ramp, and my boat is full of gas. My old boss thinks I'm sick today. He won't have me to harass, 'cause I'm out here on the river, and he can kiss my big old bass.
All righty then, that sounds like it's time for James Guggenauer, our master rod builder from downtown Payson at Rim Country Custom Rods. Hey, what's happening, Brother James?
Hey, good morning, Don. Great show this morning. Great show.
Always a pleasure to have Jim DeVos. We look to have Jim back more often in the future to lend his expertise on all of our issues having to do with wildlife.
I agree. It's nice to hear a voice of reason who understands both sides of the situation.
Wait a minute. Am I losing my title of the voice of moderation and reason to Mr. DeVos now?
Johnny, I think he was talking about you, not me.
Oh, okay, okay.
Hey, let's talk about some fishing for...
Yeah, let's do it.
The first news is a reminder to everybody to get your 2014 fishing license. And I heard a rumor, and perhaps Jim can confirm this, if you go to one of the Game and Fish offices in Mesa or the main office in Phoenix, you can purchase a 2014 fishing license at 2013 prices, saving like $13 on the price of a Class A fishing license.
Don't tell me that. I just bought 3 at 2014 prices.
Well,
I don't think that's accurate. I think they're, in the short term, what I understand is if you buy them at the offices, you actually save $3 over the online price, but it's not $13.
Okay.
You're just trying to get me fired up. That's what you're doing.
Okay. Hey, Roosevelt Lake. We've been talking about the storms that we've had up here in the north recently, but they've kind of passed. Things are starting to settle down on the lake, and we're getting into that phase of the year where we have some very good stable weather in the area and on Roosevelt Lake. The water clarity has increased dramatically from what it's been, and that was due to the new inflow of water that we had a couple of weeks ago. The water temperature remains in the low to mid 50s, and we're at 47% full in the lake. So it's a good time to be on the water. You don't have to worry about the storms, although you got to check. But nice time to be out there. Now in the afternoons, I'm still being told that in the shallow waters, those bass are going up there to feed, and sometimes they feed pretty heavily in the shallow waters in the afternoon. So you always want to be checking that. A drop shot technique was working very well in those areas. And if I was going to go look at a place, I would take like a Cottonwood Cove, or I would take a Methodist Cove, those kinds of places. When I'm talking about shallow water, those would be the areas that we're looking at. Crappie fishing was still called poor to fair. Even in spite of the stable weather, not seeing good numbers of crappie caught, but they are schooling. So we can see them on the graph, just not in the big numbers that we've seen before. The only bait that's been reported successful is a 1/4-ounce jig head with a 2-inch curly tail grub tipped with a live minnow. And if we wanted to pick a hot spot on the lake, it would be up on the salt end around the schoolhouse ramp, and you want to work your way out towards Campaign Bay. Those seem to be the areas that guys are being most successful on crappie fishing. I also would add that I received 2 reports that crappie fishing on Apache Lake last week was excellent. So just a heads up for crappie anglers.
That's interesting. Hey, let me ask you this, Jim. Back on the largemouth, any success on rattle traps?
Yes. You know, in the mornings, when, their fish aren't going to be up shallow as much, guys are still using, lipless crankbaits like you're describing there, deep running crankbaits, and of course a jigging spoon like a crippled herring are working pretty well. If you can find those schools of fish, and you're going to be looking more in the 40 to 50 feet range, you're going to see fish there, and possibly can catch them. The other thing, talking about the deep fish for a second, if you go to one of those coves that I was describing earlier, and you take a jig, cast it to the middle of the cove into about 30 feet of water, and drag it to about 60 feet of water, you'll find bass in those locations also. Middle of coves in deep water.
That's like fishing for tomcod, 60 feet.
That's for sure. But the weather is so nice in the afternoons. Now, as I say that, today it's a little windy up here. But it's been real nice fishing in the afternoon. A lot of good reports that, anglers are on fish. And if the water temperature gets to that right temperature that they start moving shallow, it could be a lot of fun.
Good stuff. What else was happening? Mood of the general public up there on the wolf issue?
We're still struggling with the wolf issue. There was an article in the Independent paper up in Pine Top last week. It gave an update on November kills of cattle. There were two in Arizona and one in New Mexico. Two of the three could not be confirmed by wolves, but one around the Eager area was a confirmed wolf kill, and it's related back to this alpha male and female group that they've been trying to capture for the last 6 months. They captured the male a few months ago through a helicopter using a dart rifle, but they haven't been able to get with the female, who is running now with another male wolf. And they're saying that those two now...
That's just like those girls.
Yeah, because this one is Eager. So, there's just a lot of frustration. We keep saying...
It's a genetic defect.
Right. We just keep saying that, wild animals are wild animals. The humans are controlling the release of these wolves into the area. And God forbid somebody loses a child or somebody gets attacked by one of these wolves. I think it's going to be a game changer if something like that would happen to this program. So I know it's remote, and I understand Jim's point of view on a lot of these things, but just for the people that live here and the people that ranch here and the people that use the forest for recreation, it's a big deal. And I know it's remote, but if it happens, who are we going to look at 10 years from now and say, you know what, we probably shouldn't have done that?
We've seen a couple of issues like that in our lifetime, haven't we?
We have.
Yeah. Well, hey, let me point out some good stuff. Bill Luke Bass Days is coming up. Right after that, the Arizona Game and Fish Expo is on the books the week after the Bass Days, and I would encourage anybody to check out the ShakeRattleAndTroll.com or azgfd.gov to look at all the things that, rumor has it, Jim, Beretta's going to have their tractor trailer in pistols.
You know what? I'm going to let you be the one that relies on that rumor. I've been busy enough with wolves and other things that the Expo's not been on my radar screen.
Well,
and I hope it never is.
Yeah, boy,
I prefer you where you're doing what you're doing. There's a whole lot more issues than worrying about what we got going on at the Expo.
We have a fish tank.
Since we're talking about Roosevelt, that's come on the radar screen as well.
Gizzard shad?
Well, you know what? It's easy to implicate gizzard shad, but part of what we're going to look at, and we're going to try and start some things this spring.
Yeah, there's not a magic bullet for Roosevelt. That's a multi-pronged attack on that, but go ahead.
It is. We're starting to look at some different things. Certainly the potential to put some Florida strain bass in there. We're also looking at initiating some of the research that's needed there to answer what's going on in Roosevelt, because I think the general consensus is that things are not what they should be there. So we're trying to move things up. We had talked about funding in 2015. We're scrambling right now, and we're going to start kicking some stuff off in 2014. See if we can get Roosevelt back, at least approaching what it was in its heyday.
Well, that definitely is our bass factory, and I think with some of the programs that you've been working with Chief Cantrell on, and Jim's aware. Jim, how many people did we have at that roundtable meeting? Did you get a head count?
Yes, I think we counted like 68 people. They were at the latest one.
Okay. It was a good turnout. Bill Stewart, Dave Weedman did great jobs. We've got Curtis Gill as a new WM in that region, coming out of biology. That guy's a wealth of information. I mean,
And Chief Cantrell.
Well, absolutely. But, this is what we were talking about earlier. I think we in fisheries and across the board in the department, we're probably as strong now with the staff that we have, and Jim was talking about earlier, we're losing a lot of good people, but, a lot of good people are coming in. That coupled with the strength of the commission, I think 2014 we're going to see some good stuff. And, we've got some battlefronts ahead of us, but I think we've got the battalion to achieve the mission, so.
And I agree, and it takes people like your guest, Jim DeVos, who have a good understanding of these issues and will make the right decisions for us. So.
Well, I want to invite everybody out to Bill Luke Bass Days, whether you fish or not, meet a lot of the folks from Arizona Game and Fish, and then roll over into their outdoor expo and meet the people that are out there working for us. And unfortunately, John Q. Public doesn't get to meet and rub shoulders with the guys that we deal with on a weekly basis, man. I mean, they're good people out there doing a job that nobody else wants to do for us. James, I'm going to wish you a great rest of the day and Happy New Year next year, and we'll do it again.
Same to you. Thanks, Don.
All right, James Guggenauer, Ribbon Custom Rods. Check them out.
Just the other day, I had nothing to do, so I kicked back on the cabin's front porch and bottomed out my homemade brew. Yeah.
All righty, we're back. JK and Jim DeVos. We've got about 12 minutes to wrap this up, Jim. Is there anything else that you want to bring up that we haven't covered?
One of the things that I think is important for listeners and folks that they interact with is conservation should be everybody's job. Certainly, we've got about 620 people at Arizona Game and Fish that is our job, literally.
620? I thought you had 654.
Yeah,
but I haven't counted them.
Well, I think that we have legislative authority to go to 654, but
okay.
we manage a little bit less than that. But there's opportunities, whether it's working through an organization, whether you want to adopt a water, but people just simply need to get out and get involved. You think about the size of the state of Arizona and the 620 of us that do this on a daily basis. We need help. But I think more importantly, part of what I see as citizen involvement is learning the issues and having some information that we can sit down and talk with the public, others that aren't as conservation oriented as your listeners, and be able to talk issues and develop an understanding. Arizona Game and Fish can't do the job alone. We simply have to have citizen involvement and an informed citizenry.
I think there's a couple of prongs up to that effect too, Jim, and one of them is that number one, the general public has no clue that they don't pay for a penny to see wildlife, and that the true conservationists are those people who go out and actively hunt and fish and purchase those items, whether it's the federal funding or the state licenses and tags and fees that we pay. We are the ones who are responsible for all wildlife that they see. So that's an involvement there. The second one is that for the most part, a lot of hunters, there's 112,000 applicants from the state of Arizona each year for an elk tag, which is my favorite number because there's so darn many of them and we get drawn so seldom. But to see how few of them are actively involved in understanding the mechanisms of the Arizona Game and Fish Department on working on projects on the land. You know, we've chatted in the past. You know, it's been 20 plus years now that I've been pushing the conservation bonus point. I'd like to see every hunter be required, in order to hunt, to have to spend 40 hours on the ground during their lifetime, where they have to participate in on-the-ground projects, whether it's water tanks, whether it's tree removal, whether it's understanding that you can't put toxic materials on tree stumps after you've done a clear cutting, and that's why they don't like using the shears anymore, and that they want to start going with the dozers and pulling out the stumps so that the alligator junipers and the pinyon trees that suck up water, and there is not enough forage base out there, etc. Those are the kinds of things I'd like the public to know.
It's a complex world that we live in. And for the last 150 years, people in Arizona have shaped where we're at today. We have a forest that's too thick. We've got grasslands that have been degraded by woody invaders. And again, the agencies can't accomplish bringing back a more natural state by ourselves. You're absolutely right. You know, whether it's 40 hours or whether it's a weekend, or whether it's just becoming adequately informed, people have to become more engaged than they have in the past. You're right, tax monies, state tax monies don't come to the Arizona Game and Fish Department. We're self-funded, and the people that fund us are the hunters and anglers. Or actually people that buy licenses, because there's absolutely no reason why, if we have a listener that doesn't hunt or doesn't fish but is interested in conservation, for $57 you can buy a hunting and fishing license. You may never go, but that's $57 that goes directly to conservation in the state of Arizona.
That, and then there's opportunities to engage in conservation, the private sector conservation groups that are out there on the ground doing a lot of stuff. What ADA projects have we got coming up here?
We're going to have one in either late March or early April, and I know that's jamming a lot on us because we're going to have Bill Luke Bass Days, we're going to have the Game and Fish Expo, and then we're going to have the project out by on the east side of Pumpkin Center, where we're going to put in a couple of 5,000-gallon tanks for water for all wildlife, but specifically for mule deer. So that's on it.
Wait a minute. Water catch? I thought it was a sports bar.
No, Don, I just said you could drink from it.
There you go.
Details. You always, Jimmy always misses that little thing.
Detail. I gotcha.
Yeah.
What?
You know, one of the other things, Don, kind of a little teaser for a future show. We've got a couple of initiatives that we're going to roll out after the first of the year that I think will be hugely positive. We're going to engage in some very proactive management strategies to help build wildlife populations. And
you are not leaving that chair until you tell me. I'll choke this thing out of you. You know that.
I'm looking at what you weigh and what I weigh, and I think it'd be a pretty good scrap, and I am getting out of my chair.
Oh, yeah.
But I will be happy to come back around February and talk about them. But I think people will be really, really excited once we roll it out.
When you mention the word initiatives, is this going through the state legislature?
No, sir. It is some programs that we have within our capacity right now. We're going to look for partners. We want groups like the Arizona Deer Association to engage. That might give you a little clue on what one of the initiatives. We might
rhymes with fear, deer.
Rhymes with good things.
Okay.
If we have quail aficionados out there, they may want to pay attention to the next time I come. But we'll leave it at that.
I love it.
See, we just generated another segment of listeners for the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quail Unlimited, here you come in the ADA.
Fur and feathers.
I'm salivating. I like it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. JK, do you have anything to add before we get this thing wrapped up?
No, I appreciate the time, Jim. You and I could sit and talk all day, and we know that. But I appreciate the fact that, number one, that you came back to the department, and number two, that for that 7 years that you were on a hiatus from an official government position, you were a strong advocate for all of the conservation groups, and to that, I'm grateful. Thank you.
And I'm glad to be back. I'm having a pretty good time.
You got some good folks up there watching your back. JK, what are your goals for 2014?
2014 is going to be interesting.
As it relates to wildlife.
Would you like to specify what species of wildlife? The Arizona Deer Association this year, I think we're going to... He gagged on that. It's okay.
Oh, man.
We're going to take a long, hard look this year.
Would you get me an application for Samaritan Behavioral Health for him? Please.
No, we've got the projects coming up. All the HPC projects that were submitted, we've got copies printed off. The ADA is going to take a look at it. It is a mountain of literature. Unfortunately, deer are everywhere, or fortunately, deer are everywhere in this state, whether it's mule deer or coos deer. And all those projects, we have to come up with some plans as to how we're going to divvy up the $1 million+ that's out there from all the deer tags that we had that were either auctioned or raffled off this year. So we're going to be looking at that long and hard. And again, the project money, we're just praying for snow. A lot of snow through the winter.
We need the water. Well, that's what's going to help Roosevelt Lake, probably.
But a slow melt, please.
Slow melt.
Slow melt, a lot of snow.
Has anybody checked white tanks? How that catch was doing?
Yeah, that one supposedly is doing really, really well. I've heard a couple of people who have been out there. I talked to the department people after it was finished, and it looked really good, and it's starting to get hit regularly now.
Nice. All righty, James, thanks for coming down. JK, we will get you that application to Behavioral Health, folks. God love you. Thanks for listening. Hope you learned something. I'm Don McDowell.
John Colazar.
And Jim DeVos.
Take your kids fishing, hug your bass boat, salute a soldier. It's not free.
Well, kids to watch me